This happened in February of 2019 during one of the worst blizzards my part of Michigan had seen in over a decade. At the time, I was 26 years old and living alone in a renovated farmhouse about 20 miles outside of Grand Rapids. The house sat far from the road, connected by a long, winding gravel driveway that disappeared completely when it snowed hard enough. My younger brother Justin was staying with me that weekend. He was 21, home from college, and completely unfazed by weather warnings. We had always been close, but we were opposites in every meaningful way. I prepared for disasters. I had a generator, weeks of food, and enough firewood stacked outside to survive the apocalypse. Justin believed everything would work itself out. That confidence faded when the National Weather Service upgraded the storm to a life-threatening blizzard event. By 7 that evening, the outside world had vanished. The windows didn't show snow falling, they showed nothing at all. Just a solid, moving wall of white. The wind screamed non-stop, high-pitched and metallic, rattling the farmhouse in ways I had never heard before. The old beams groaned like something alive was twisting inside the walls. Then the power went out. We were ready for it. Candles were already lit. The fireplace roared. Shadows danced along the walls of the living room, while we sat in silence, listening to the storm. That was when we heard the sound. A heavy, rhythmic thudding. It didn't come from the roof or the walls. It came from the back of the house, specifically the mudroom door. Justin froze, mid-sip of his cider. "Is that a branch?" he asked, though his voice told me he already knew the answer. "Too heavy," I said. I grabbed the maglite from the coffee table and we moved slowly down the hall. The mudroom was a small, unheated space separating the kitchen from the back porch. As we got closer, the thudding stopped. Something else replaced it. Scratching. Wet. Desperate. Like fingernails dragging across wood. I clicked the flashlight on and aimed it at the small window in the door. A face was pressed against the glass. It was a man. His skin was waxy and gray, his eyelashes frozen together with ice. He wasn't wearing a coat, just a thin, soaked hoodie. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with raw panic. "Help," he croaked. "Please." I can't feel my hands. Justin reached for the deadbolt immediately. "Wait," I said, grabbing his arm. Something felt wrong. Every instinct I had was screaming. No car in the driveway. No footprints I could see through the storm. No coat. No gloves. "Where did you come from?" I shouted through the door. The man didn't answer. He slammed his forehead into the glass. "They're right behind me," he screamed. "Let me in, or I'm dead." Against my better judgment, the sight of his blue-tinged skin won. Justin threw the bolt and yanked the door open. The man collapsed inside, curling on the linoleum floor and shaking so violently his teeth clicked. He smelled like stale cigarettes and something sharp and metallic. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." Justin ran for a blanket while I stayed where I was, keeping the flashlight trained on him. That's when I noticed his hands. They weren't pale with frostbite. They were stained, dark red. "You're bleeding," I said. The man stared at his hands like he'd never seen them before. Then he chuckled, softly, a dry, hollow sound. "It's not mine." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Justin returned and wrapped the blanket around him, but I saw my brother hesitate when he noticed the stains. The man said his name was Parker. We moved him into the kitchen near the fire, where he slowly stopped shaking. "My car slid off the road," Parker said once. His voice steadied. "A mile back. A couple stopped to help me. Man and woman. Silver SUV." He swallowed. "They had a knife. I fought back. I ran." "A mile?" I asked. "In this storm, you'd be surprised what adrenaline can do," he replied, watching my face carefully. Justin checked his phone again. "No signal? No landline?" "We're cut off," he said. "At least until morning." Parker nodded slowly. "That's fine." I didn't like how he said it. I went to make tea, mostly to get away from him. While the kettle heated, I glanced out the kitchen window. For just a second, the wind eased. At the end of my driveway, near the gate, faint red and white lights flickered. A vehicle was idling there. My stomach dropped. When I went back into the living room, Parker was standing now, not sleeping, not resting, just watching the front door. I leaned toward Justin and whispered, "There's a car at the gate." His eyes widened. "I'm getting the shotgun," I said. I slipped into the mudroom and opened the cabinet. It was empty. The gun was gone. So were the shells. My heart started pounding as I looked down at the wet floor near the door. Lying in the slush was a set of car keys with a rental agency tag. Attached was a laminated label. It didn't say Parker. It read, Detective Miller, Michigan State Police. Before I could process that, Justin screamed my name from the living room. I ran back in. Parker stood there holding my shotgun like he'd carried one his whole life. "Get away from the windows," he said calmly. Then the front door exploded inward. The front door didn't open. It detonated. Wood splintered inward, as if the house itself had been struck by a bomb. The antique oak frame, older than I was, older than my parents, shattered under the impact of a sledgehammer. Snow and ice blasted into the living room in a blinding swirl. Through it stepped a silhouette. The man was huge. He wore a tactical parka and a thermal face mask that left only his eyes visible. Those eyes weren't panicked. They weren't rushed. They were calm, calculating. Before either Justin or I could scream, the shotgun went off. The blast was deafening in the confined space, lighting the room in a violent orange flash. The man in the doorway was thrown backward, vanishing into the white chaos outside. "Down!" Parker shouted. Now Justin and I didn't hesitate. We dove behind the heavy dining table, just as the windows on the north side of the house shattered inward. Gunfire, not wild shots, not panic fire, controlled, precise. Bullets punched clean holes through the drywall above our heads. Plaster dust rained down like powdered snow. Whoever was outside knew exactly where they were aiming. "These aren't cops," I yelled. "Who are they?" Parker crouched behind the couch, already reloading my shotgun with shells he must have taken earlier. His hands were steady, too steady. I took something he said flatly, something valuable. "And now they can't leave witnesses." The words hit harder than the gunfire. "You mean us," Justin whispered. Parker glanced at him once. Yes, my stomach twisted. I had let this man inside. I had opened the door. I looked at my brother, his face pale, eyes wide, no trace of his usual optimism left. "We need the basement," I said. "Pantry. Root cellar. They'll see you," Parker replied. "I'll cover." He rose and fired again, forcing whoever was outside to retreat. The moment the shooting paused, I grabbed Justin and dragged him across the kitchen floor, glass biting into our hands and knees. We reached the pantry. I yanked open the old trapdoor and shoved Justin toward the ladder. "Go." He didn't argue. As he descended into the darkness, I heard a thud behind me. I turned. A man had come through the broken kitchen window. He stood less than 3 feet away, a suppressed pistol raised, aimed directly at my head. He didn't speak. He squeezed the trigger. The gun jammed. Before he could react, Parker was there. He didn't fire the shotgun. He swung it hard. The butt connected with the side of the man's head with a sickening crack. The intruder collapsed instantly. Parker looked at me, blood splattered across his face. "Get in the hole," he said, "and don't come out until you hear a snowplow, not a car. A plow." Another burst of gunfire tore through the house. I dropped into the cellar and slammed the trapdoor shut, sliding the iron bolt into place just as footsteps thundered above us. The next 6 hours felt like a lifetime. The root cellar was freezing damp and pitch black. It smelled like dirt and old vegetables. Justin shivered uncontrollably. I held him, trying to keep us warm, listening. Above us, the house became a war zone. Boots pounded across the floorboards. More glass shattered. Furniture was overturned. At one point, screaming erupted long, raw, and filled with something worse than pain. Understanding. Then, silence. Not peaceful silence. Heavy silence. Like the house itself was holding its breath. The storm continued outside, but inside everything went dead. I kept thinking about what Parker had said. They can't leave witnesses. Around 4 in the morning, a new sound joined the wind. A low mechanical rumble that vibrated through the cellar walls. A snowplow. I waited. I forced myself to wait. Then I heard the unmistakable scrape of metal hitting gravel. Voices followed. Real voices. Loud. Human. I unbolted the trapdoor and pushed it open. The kitchen was unrecognizable. Snow had drifted halfway across the floor. Bullet holes peppered the walls. The dining table was shredded. Blood stained the linoleum, already half buried by fresh snow. There were no bodies. Outside, 2 plow drivers and a sheriff's deputy stood on the porch, staring at the wreckage. "What happened here?" the deputy asked. "We were attacked," I said. "A man helped us. His name was Parker." The deputy didn't answer. He walked down the driveway where the plow had cleared enough snow to reveal a silver SUV. Inside were 2 men. They weren't shot. They were bound with zip ties and left to freeze. Their faces were locked in terror. Later, the police told us the truth. Detective Miller had been found alive, 2 towns over, beaten, stripped of his car and credentials. Parker wasn't a victim. He was a professional thief who had intercepted a hit meant for someone else, and he had used my house as a fortress. 2 weeks later, while staying in a rental, as the farmhouse was repaired, I found something in my winter coat pocket, the one I'd left hanging in the mudroom that night. A folded note. "You have a nice home, Marcus. Thanks for the tea. I'll be back for the shotgun when the snow melts." I haven't slept through a storm since. Every time the wind howls and the house creaks, I find myself staring at the door, wondering if someone is standing on the other side of the glass, cold, desperate, and waiting for me to let them in again. This happened during the winter of 2014. At the time, I was 22 and in graduate school, and my best friend Emily and I were driving from Chicago back to her parents' house in Lincoln, Nebraska for winter break. We had both seen the weather reports. We had both read the warnings flashing across highway signs that said no travel advised. But when you're young, tired, and convinced, your invincible warnings feel optional. By the time we crossed into Nebraska, the snow had stopped being snow. It became something else entirely. Interstate 80 is flat and empty, a long stretch of nothing that offers no shelter when the wind picks up. Visibility collapsed so fast it felt unreal. I couldn't see the road. I couldn't see the lines. I couldn't even see the hood of my own car. The world outside the windshield turned into a spinning wall of gray. Lena Emily said, tightly gripping the armrest, "You need to stop." "I can't stop on the interstate," I snapped back. "Someone will slam into us." "There is no traffic speed anymore," she said. "Look." Ahead of us, faint red taillights glowed through the white. To our left, a massive jackknifed semi-blocked, multiple lanes. Cars were scattered everywhere, abandoned at odd angles like toys dropped in the snow. We weren't moving. We were trapped. I put the car in park, but left the engine running for heat. The wind rocked the car hard enough to make it sway. Snow piled against the doors faster than I expected. An hour passed, then another. Eventually, Emily convinced me to turn the engine off to save gas. The silence afterward felt heavy and unnatural, broken only by the scream of the wind and the occasional distant honk. The inside of the car grew colder by the minute. We wrapped ourselves in emergency blankets and tried to sleep. Sometime around midnight, I heard a sound. A soft tapping. It came from the passenger side window. Emily jolted upright. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, my stomach already tightening. I turned on my phone, flashlight, and aimed it at the glass. The bottom half of the window was buried in snow, but the top was still clear. A man stood outside. He wore a bright yellow rain slicker, the kind fishermen wear, and it looked absurdly thin for a blizzard like this. His hood was pulled low over his face. In one hand, he held a clipboard. He didn't look like police. He didn't look like emergency services. He just stood there, completely unaffected by the screaming wind. Emily cracked the window an inch. "Hello, are you with rescue?" The man didn't answer. He raised the clipboard so we could see it. Even in the dim light, I could tell it was covered in writing. Rows of car models, license plates, notes written in cramped handwriting. "Names," he said softly. "I need the names of everyone inside." "Are you state patrol?" I asked. He ignored the question. "Names," he repeated. "For the manifest." Emily swallowed. "What manifest?" The man finally looked at me. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, and he wasn't blinking. "The plows aren't coming tonight," he said. "The storm is the sorting. I just need to know who stayed." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold. "There are only 2 of us," I said quickly. "Please, do you have a radio? We're freezing." He scribbled something on the clipboard, never taking his eyes off the page. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the whiteout as if he'd never been there. "That was wrong," Emily whispered. He didn't even have a flashlight. I know, I said. We're not staying here. I turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. Emily grabbed my wrist. Don't keep trying. You'll kill it. Through the back window, I saw the yellow slicker again. The man had stopped beside an SUV, about 50 yards behind us. He tapped on their window. The door opened. A woman stepped out, looking confused. The man leaned close, like he was speaking softly to her. Then he grabbed her. It wasn't violent. It was smooth, controlled. She didn't scream. She didn't resist. She followed him into the snow, away from the road, toward the open fields, where there was nothing but endless white. Emily, I gasped. He's taking her. She looked, then shook her head desperately. I don't see anything. Lena, the storm is messing with you. I saw him. I reached for the door handle, but Emily grabbed my arm. If you go out there, you'll die in minutes. Look at the snow. She was right. The drifts were already halfway up the doors. We sat there in silence. Then, the tapping started again. This time it wasn't on the window. It was on the roof. Thud. Thud. A voice followed directly above us. You lied, the voice said calmly. There's room for 2 more on the list. The tapping on the roof wasn't sharp like it had been on the glass. It was dull, heavy. Each thud vibrated through the thin metal of the car, like someone kneeling directly above my head. Lena, Emily whispered. She was curled into the footwell, now her knees pulled to her chest. Don't look up. I lied. The voice came again, closer this time, not muffled by the wind. You lied, Lena, it said calmly. The manifest has to be accurate. The car rocked. Hard. The metal groaned as weight shifted on the roof. I heard something scrape, then felt the pressure move forward. He was climbing down. The tapping started on the windshield. Through the snow crusting the glass, I saw a smear of yellow. The man in the rain slicker was on the hood now. He wasn't tapping with his hand anymore. He was using the corner of the clipboard, wrapping it slowly against the glass. I could barely breathe. He brushed snow away with his bare hand. His skin wasn't pale from the cold. It was dark blue, almost purple, like blood had stopped moving long ago. He cleared a small circle and pressed his eye against it. That eye is something I will never forget. It was wide and unblinking, the pupil blown out, staring at us with the detached focus of someone reading a spreadsheet. Emily Carter, he said softly. Born 1992. Then, his gaze shifted. Lena Brooks. Born 1992. Emily screamed. How do you know that she cried? The man didn't answer. He reached into his slicker pocket and pressed something against the glass. Emily's driver's license. My heart dropped into my stomach. Emily tore open her purse, dumping everything onto the floor. Her wallet was there, but it was empty. No ID, no cards, nothing. He was inside, she whispered. While we were sleeping, the realization crushed the air out of my chest. At some point in the absolute silence of the whiteout, this man had opened our door, leaned over our bodies, and taken her ID without waking us. You're scheduled, the man said. You've been delayed. The woman from the SUV is already walking. She's cold. She needs company. He reached for the passenger door handle. It clicked. Lock it, I shouted. Emily slammed her body against the door, gripping the handle, her thumb jammed onto the lock. I did the same on my side, even though he wasn't there. The man pulled again. Harder. The car shook. The storm is the sorting, he chanted. His voice rose and fell with the wind. The weak are gathered. The lost are accounted for. Open the door, and the cold is quick. Stay inside, and it will take longer. He slammed into the door again. The glass began to crack. I laid on the horn, a long, desperate blast that vanished into the storm like it meant nothing. Then he stopped. Everything went still. The man straightened on the hood, his head disappearing into the white darkness above us. He tilted slightly as if listening. Far away, cutting through the wind, came a new sound. A high-pitched mechanical whine. A snowmobile. The man's posture changed. His calm certainty drained into something like disappointment. He looked back down at us through the circle on the windshield. Next time he whispered, the manifest is never finished. Then he stepped off the hood. He vanished into the storm. Minutes later, headlights appeared. 2 state troopers on snowmobiles reached our car and began digging us out. When they finally opened the door, Emily and I collapsed into their arms, shaking and sobbing. There was a man, I kept saying. A clipboard. A yellow coat. One trooper walked back toward the SUV we had seen earlier. He stayed there for a long time. When he returned, his face was pale. "The vehicle's empty," he said. The driver walked into the field. They found her the next morning, 2 miles from the interstate. She hadn't frozen to death. The coroner ruled the cause as a single puncture wound at the base of her skull, clean, precise. Weeks later, when our car was returned from impound, the police called us back. They had found something. Tucked into the seat pocket behind the driver's seat was a yellow sheet of paper. A list. Dozens of names. Some crossed out. Others checked. At the bottom, Emily Carter, pending Lena Brooks, pending next, to both a single word, soon. I never drive through Nebraska in winter anymore, and every time I hear tapping on glass, I remember the man with the clipboard and wonder how many names he's added since that night. This happened in December of 2021. I work as a high-end house sitter for wealthy clients who travel during the holidays. It's a great gig, usually. I get to stay in multi-million-dollar homes, drink expensive wine, and make sure the pipes don't freeze. That year, I was hired by the Sterling family. They owned a modernist masterpiece in the Colorado Rockies about 40 minutes outside of Aspen. The house was a marvel of glass and steel perched on the edge of a cliff with a panoramic view of the valley. The Sterlings were going to Switzerland for 3 weeks and offered me $5,000 just to stay there and keep the driveway clear for the propane deliveries. "The house is smart," Mr. Sterling told me before they left. "Everything is controlled by the tablet in the kitchen. Lights, heat, security. If the perimeter alarms go off, it's usually just a deer. Just reset it and go back to sleep." The first 4 days were paradise. I spent my time reading by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the light change on the mountains. But on the 5th day, the sky turned a bruised, heavy purple. The blizzard hit at 4:00 p.m. It wasn't like the storms back home in Ohio. This was a mountain storm. Within an hour, the house felt like it was being bombarded. The wind hit the glass walls with such force I was afraid they'd shatter, despite being triple-paned. I was in the kitchen making dinner when the first alert popped up on the smart home tablet. Perimeter, Zone 4, motion detected. I looked at the floor plan on the screen. Zone 4 was the wraparound deck on the north side of the house. I sighed, thinking of Mr. Sterling's deer. I tapped the screen to check the camera feed. The screen was a blur of gray and white. The snow was falling so thick the night vision couldn't penetrate more than 3 feet. I saw nothing but the swirling storm. I hit reset. 5 minutes later, perimeter zone 4, motion detected. I hit reset again. 10 minutes later, perimeter zone 3, motion detected. Zone 3 was the back porch near the master bedroom. I stopped chopping vegetables. A deer wouldn't be moving from the deck to the porch in a level 4 blizzard. The wind was gusting at 70 miles per hour. Animals hunker down in weather like this. They don't go for a stroll on a cliffside porch. I walked over to the glass doors leading to the porch. I turned off the interior lights so I could see out, pressing my face against the cold glass. I saw nothing but the white wall of the storm. Then, during a momentary lull in the wind, I heard it. It was a rhythmic sound, the sound of metal hitting stone. It sounded exactly like someone was clearing the snow off the porch with a shovel. I froze. Who would be shoveling snow at 8:00 p.m. in the middle of a historic blizzard? "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small in the cavernous living room. The scraping stopped instantly. I waited, my heart thumping in my throat. I reached for the tablet and switched to the floodlight control. I toggled the lights for Zone 3 to 100% brightness. A massive bank of LEDs roared to life outside. The porch was illuminated in a harsh, clinical white. There was no one there. But there was something on the porch that hadn't been there an hour ago. The snow on the porch was about 2 feet deep, but right in the center of the deck, leading from the stairs all the way to the glass door, was a perfectly cleared path. Not a path like a person would make with a shovel, it was a tunnel. The snow had been piled up into high walls on either side, and the floor of the porch had been scraped clean down to the wood. It looked like a trench, and it ended exactly 4 inches from the glass door where I was standing. I backed away, a cold shiver racing down my spine. The tablet chimed again. Perimeter Zone 1, entry alert. Zone 1 was the front door. I ran to the front of the house. The front door was a massive slab of reinforced steel. I looked at the smart lock display. It said locked. But as I stood there, I heard it again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was coming from the other side of the door. Someone was shoveling the snow away from the entrance. "I'm calling the police," I yelled. I grabbed my phone, but as I expected, there was no service. The house had satellite internet, so I tried to use the tablet to place a VoIP call. The screen on the tablet flickered. The floor plan disappeared, replaced by a scrolling line of text. User admin has logged in. My breath hitched. The Sterlings were the only admins. They were in Switzerland. The text on the screen began to change. "Admin, it's much easier to work when the lights are on. Thank you." Suddenly, all the interior lights in the house turned on to their maximum setting. The house, which was essentially a glass box, was now glowing like a lantern in the middle of the dark, empty mountains. I was visible from every angle, miles away. And then the external speakers, the ones the Sterlings used for outdoor parties, clicked on. A voice began to play. It wasn't a human voice. It was a text-to-speech program, cold and robotic, echoing off the mountainsides and into the house. "The snow is heavy, Sean. I've cleared the porch. I've cleared the door. Now I just need to clear the inside." I looked at the tablet. A new camera feed had opened. It wasn't an external camera. It was the camera built into the tablet itself. On the screen I saw myself. I saw the look of pure terror on my face. And I saw something else. In the reflection of the glass wall behind me, a section of the floorboards in the living room was lifting up. There was a subfloor maintenance crawl space I hadn't known about. A hand, pale and thin, reached out from the darkness of the floor. I didn't scream. My throat had constricted so tightly that I couldn't even draw a full breath. I stood there, paralyzed, watching that pale, spindly hand grip the edge of the mahogany floorboard. It wasn't a sudden, violent movement. It was slow, methodical. The hand was followed by an arm thin and sinewy, clothed in a stained gray thermal sleeve. Then the head emerged. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. His hair was a patchy, thinning mess of gray, and his eyes were sunken so deep into his skull they looked like 2 pits of shadow. He didn't look at me, not at first. He looked at the tablet in my hand. "The automation is off by 3 seconds, he whispered. His voice didn't come from his mouth. It came through the house's intercom system, distorted and layered with a sickening digital hum. He was using a lapel mic, patched directly into the Sterling's high-end audio-visual rack. "Who are you?" I finally managed to choke out. I backed away toward the kitchen, my hand fumbling on the counter for the chef's knife I'd been using for the vegetables. The man pulled himself up out of the crawl space with a grunt of effort. He stood nearly 6'4", but he was so gaunt he looked like a skeleton draped in rags. He held a short, sharpened spade, the kind used for detail gardening, but the edge had been ground down to a razor-sharp point. "I built the foundation," he said, his voice echoing from the speakers in the ceiling. "I poured the concrete. I laid the fiber optic cables. I am the nervous system of this house, Sean. And you're just a parasite, a temporary occupant. Clutter." He took a step toward me. The smart home tablet in my hand hissed with static. "Admin, initiating house cleaning mode." Suddenly, the massive motorized shades on the glass walls began to drop. These weren't just decorative curtains. They were heavy, reinforced thermal barriers designed to protect the glass during high wind events. One by one, they slammed shut with a heavy thud, sealing me inside the glass box with him. The panoramic view of the mountains was gone. The valley was gone. I was trapped in a 4,000 square foot tomb of steel and silicon. "The Sterlings are late on their payments," the man said, his eyes finally locking onto mine. They were flat, devoid of the spark of sanity. Not the money, the maintenance. They don't respect the equilibrium. They bring in outsiders. They leave the lights on. They let the snow pile up against the vents. He swung the spade. It wasn't a wild, swinging blow. It was a precise, practiced movement. The metal blade bit into the marble kitchen island, inches from my hand, sending a spray of stone chips into my face. I didn't wait for a second strike. I turned and bolted. The house was a maze of open concept levels and glass partitions. I ran toward the master suite, thinking I could lock myself in the reinforced dressing room. But as I reached the door, the smart lock turned red. Access denied. The man was behind me, his footsteps heavy and rhythmic on the hardwood. Thump, scrape, thump, scrape. He was dragging the shovel behind him, the metal edge scoring the expensive floor. "You can't hide in a house that knows where you are, Sean," the speakers mocked. I scrambled up the floating staircase toward the loft office. My only hope was the manual override. Mr. Sterling had mentioned a physical server room in the basement, the brain of the house, where the digital locks could be bypassed. But to get there, I had to go back down past the man with the shovel and into the very crawl space he had just crawled out of. I reached the loft and looked down over the railing. The man was standing in the center of the living room, bathed in the artificial glow of the LED strips. He looked up at me and tilted his head. "The snow is piling up, Sean," he said. "The weight is increasing. If the porch isn't cleared, the glass will stress. If the glass stresses, the seal breaks." He controlled the doors, the lights, and the temperature. As he climbed, I felt a blast of freezing air. He had opened the skylights in the roof. The blizzard began to pour into the house, a vertical column of white death spiraling down into the luxury interior. "You're insane," I screamed. "I'm efficient," he replied. As he reached the top of the stairs, I did the only thing I could think of. I didn't head for the server room. I headed for the fireplace. The Sterlings had a massive double-sided ethanol fireplace that divided the office from the hallway. It was fueled by a large tank of flammable liquid hidden in the wall. I grabbed the decorative heavy brass poker from the hearth and smashed the glass fuel gauge. The smell of alcohol hit the air instantly sharp and overwhelming. "If you come closer, I'll light it," I shouted, holding a kitchen lighter I'd swiped from the island earlier. "I'll burn the whole thing down. Your masterpiece will be ash." The man stopped. For the first time, his expression shifted. The arrogance disappeared, replaced by a twitching, frantic panic. To him, the house wasn't just a building. It was his life's work. It was his god. "No," he whispered. "The wiring. The sensors. You'll destroy the sequence." Then, "Open the front door," I yelled. "Open it now, or we both go up in flames." The speakers crackled. The admin text on the tablet flickered wildly. The house seemed to be fighting itself, the man's obsession with preservation clashing with his need to cleanse the intruder. "Admin, emergency venting initiated." The heavy thermal shades on the front door groaned and began to rise. The magnetic lock clicked with a sound, like a gunshot. "Go," the man hissed, his voice now cracking. "Leave. Your clutter. Your filth. Get out of my sight." I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted down the stairs, slipping on the snow that was now accumulating on the floor. I didn't look back. I burst through the front door and into the screaming chaos of the blizzard. The cold hit me like a physical wall, but I didn't care. I ran down the driveway, following the tunnels the man had shoveled. They led me straight toward the main road. I stumbled through drifts that were waist-deep, my lungs burning, my vision blurring, until I finally saw the orange glow of a snowplow's beacons in the distance. I was found 3 hours later suffering from stage 2 hypothermia and severe frostbite on my fingers. When the police finally made it to the Sterling estate 2 days later after the storm had cleared, the house was silent. The front door was wide open, and the interior was buried under 4 feet of drifted snow. The modernist masterpiece was a ruin. The pipes had burst, the electronics were fried by the moisture, and the expensive furniture was warped and rotted. But they didn't find the man. They found the crawl space. It led to a sophisticated bunker beneath the house that wasn't on any of the architectural plans. It was filled with monitors, all hardwired into the house's security cameras. There was a bed, a month's worth of food, and a workbench covered in blueprints of other homes in the area, all built by the same construction firm. The most terrifying thing wasn't the bunker, though. It was the shovel. They found it leaning against the kitchen island. It wasn't a gardening tool. It was a custom-made instrument, and engraved on the handle was a list of dates and addresses. The Sterling house was the 5th address on the list. The 6th address was my own apartment in Denver. I don't house sit anymore. I live in a small, old-fashioned brick building with manual locks and no smart features. But every winter, when the snow starts to fall and the wind picks up, I find myself sitting by the door, I listen, because sometimes over the sound of the wind, I think I hear the rhythmic metallic scrape of a shovel against the sidewalk, and I know that somewhere out there the architect is still working. He's still clearing the path, and he's still looking for the clutter.